Hello to all my beautiful viewers out there. On our third episode of Sneaker Jargon, today we're going to be talking about what a retro is and what an OG retro is, and what both of those two terms mean in the sneaker culture. So yes guys, episode 3, the big number 3. So as we've discussed in episode 1 and 2, we've talked about colorways and we've talked about silhouettes and what that terminology means in the sneaker culture. And in today's episode, we're going to be covering retros and OG retros, which I'm sure if you've been watching the YouTube channel for a while, you've probably heard me say like countless amounts of times, and you're probably like, Daniel, what the hell do you mean? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make an episode just on retros and OG retros, just so you guys have an understanding, and whenever I then use it in future videos, you have a full understanding. You have the context behind it. You can now fully understand what I'm saying, because I know sometimes it really seems like I'm speaking a different language when it comes to me talking about sneakers. Now, it wouldn't be an episode of Sneaker Jargon if we didn't always start off with a little bit of groundwork before we start talking about what it means in a sneaker culture. So, what is retro? What is a retro? What does retro mean? Let's do what everyone does when they don't know what a word means. We'll consult Google. So, retro, according to Google, is imitative of a style of fashion from the recent past. So what does that mean? What does the meaning that Google just said to us? What does that mean? So, retro, when being used, when someone's talking about, a retro piece of clothing, a retro pair of shoes, what it means is that that piece of clothing, that pair of shoes, is imitative or imitates a style that's from the past. Now, what I'll be talking about today is I'll be talking about how retros are applied and used in sneaker culture, how it all began, why do we use the term retros when it comes to sneakers, and then hopefully after I explain all that, we'll move on to OG retros, and that'll further expand and broaden your horizons when it comes to sneaker culture terminology. But I'm really keen to get around talking about what OG sneakers are, but I know I have to start off with just retros. So let's begin and start talking about what a retro sneaker is. Now, retro sneaker. Now that we've got the groundwork about what a retro thing is an imitation of a past style. So if someone's releasing a retro sneaker, using that same, groundwork knowledge that we now have, a retro sneaker would just be a sneaker that's an imitation of a sneaker from the past. So if I was to say, they're releasing a retro pair of Air Forces, the pair of Air Forces that they're releasing is just an imitation of the Air Forces from the past. And that's essentially what a retro sneaker is. It's just an imitation or a reimagination of the same sneaker, but from the past being brought into the now. Now, some people would be like, what? Why would you retro a sneaker? Why would anyone want to bring back sneakers from the past and put them into the modern day? Like, what's the point of that? Why not just buy the latest pair of runners or the latest pair of casual shoes? Well, there are heaps of reasons into why sneaker brands decide to retro shoes. It could be purely that the style is timeless. When I say the style is timeless, the first couple styles that come to my mind when I say that are things like the Nike Air Forces, the Adidas Stan Smiths, the New Balance NN7s. If I have to think of, one shoe per brand and not just stick to Nike and Adidas, if I had to think of shoes that get retroed, it would be because those styles are timeless. It could be, secondly, that there's a story behind the shoe. Either it gets brought into the future into the now because that story re-emerges, or it's the anniversary of that story. For an example, I was talking about recently in the channel that the Air Jordan 1 Chicagos are getting released in 2020. They're getting retroed in 2020 because it is the 35th anniversary of the first time that Michael Jordan ever wore them. It's just, again, paying homage to the sneaker and its story that's now having an anniversary, so that's why it's getting retroed. There could be heaps of reasons for a retro. For an example, a lot of artists, Kendrick Lamar, he decided to collaborate with Nike, and the shoe that he brought back was the iconic Nike runner, the Nike Cortezes. He brought them back because it holds a special place in his heart, but that would be another reason why it would be retroed. An artist that wants to work with a sneaker brand has a story from all those years ago about how much they loved a certain pair of shoes, and they want to bring that back. They want to bring their stories that they had about those shoes back into the, into the current and give it to the people. I mean, as I said, there are heaps and heaps of reasons about why shoes get retroed, but you wouldn't be able to nail every single reason on why each single pair gets retroed, but there are heaps. It happens all the time. It's just something that you just got to get used to in sneaker culture, that shoes get re-released all the time from the past. I mean, a shoe might be 40 years old in its origins, like it may have been made in the 1960s, 1970s, but if there's a story behind it, if there's a fan following behind it, if it's just an iconic style, it's most likely going to get retroed at some point. They're most likely going to bring that shoe back because it has a market, because people want it, because it's got a story, because of all the reasons, guys. It just happens. It just happens. And retroing shoes isn't exclusive to one brand as well. I thought I would just say that because I probably mentioned a lot of Nike shoes getting retroed, but Adidas does it all the time. Please, you could walk down the street and I bet you would see a pair of Adidas sneakers that came out in the 70s and 80s and you don't even realize it. Hell, you might even own a pair of Adidas sneakers from the 80s, from the 90s, and you don't even know. Heck, when was the last pair of shoes that you bought that was actually made, like designed, made, and released in 2017, 18, or 19? I bet you most of the shoes that you have were designed 10 plus years ago, but you bought a retro version 1 or 2 years ago of it. I bet you, I mean, okay, maybe you're really going to flex on me and say, oh, actually, I bought the original 10 years ago and I have not bought the retros, thank you, but I highly doubt that's all of you guys. I bet you some of you have retros of sneakers without even realizing it. Now, we've talked about retro sneakers, the idea of bringing a sneaker from the past into the present. We're going to segue on and move on to what an OG retro is, but we do need to lay some groundwork so you guys can understand what an OG retro is. Now, to start it off with, I'm going to talk about the Kendrick Lamar retros of the Nike Cortezes. Now, when Kendrick Lamar retroed the Nike Cortez, he brought the Cortez back to the future, but he added some little bits and bobs here and there that weren't like the original Nike Cortezes back in the 70s. Now, does that mean that he really retroed the Nike Cortez? Well, technically he did, because remember, a retro is an intimate style or design from the recent past, right? So it means that he imitated the Nike Cortez from the 70s and brought it to the future. So he technically did retro the Nike Cortez because he grabbed the Nike Cortez and released a new pair of shoes that was basically the Nike Cortez, but he just changed it a little bit. But it is imitative of the original. Now, what an OG retro is the idea of bringing back a pair of sneakers from the past, putting them into the present, but putting them into the present as the way they were, not changing them at all, not doing what Kendrick Lamar did and adding those little extra bits. No. Bringing it back exactly the way it is. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, why would anyone want to bring back old sneakers from the past? They have terrible cushioning, the materials are probably pretty crappy. Why would anyone want to bring a sneaker back from the past into the present? Well, the reason that we bring sneakers back from the past exactly the same way that they were, or in this case, the reason why we retro OG shoes the way they were, is because the stories behind them. The achievements that people did in these shoes, the iconic stories behind those shoes, if they were a part of a movement. There are a whole lot of reasons in why shoes are brought back the exact same way they were from back in the day. And a brand that really thrives on that is obviously Jordan brand. Michael Jordan completed all these amazing feats in his career in the 80s and 90s. So they're going to have to retro his shoes, right? And a lot of fans that are obviously like, oh, I really liked Michael Jordan at the start of his career. I really like his Air Jordan 1s that he was wearing at the start of the career. I want to be like Michael Jordan. I want to wear these shoes. So, Jordan brand releases these shoes as they were back in 1985 for those people. For the people that love the shoe, for how it was back in 1985. for people that just want a pair of the Air Jordan 1s, exactly how they were back in 1985. Jordan Brand thrives off the idea of OG retros and just retroing shoes in general. Hell, whenever Jordan releases a pair of Jordans, they're retros. Unless it's a new Jordan, it's a retro because they're bringing back a pair from the past into the present. They're imitating it. That's what it is, guys. That's what Jordan Brand does. They just thrive on retros. But that's why OG retros exist, because there are stories tied to shoes from the past, and people want those shoes brought into the future exactly how they were when they released initially. And that's really it, guys. That's what retro sneakers are, and that's what OG retros are. Just to gloss over it again very quickly, a retro is an imitation or reimagination of a sneaker from the past brought into the present. And what a retro OG is, or an OG retro, is a retro, bringing the sneaker back from the past into the present, but exactly the same way as it was when it first released. So obviously the guidelines between a retro and an OG retro are very defined. A retro can be a reimagination or a imitative version of the shoe, and it still counts as a retro. But an OG retro is very set in stone. It is exactly how the sneaker was when it was first released, being brought into the present. Now, I'm going to talk about how Jordan Brand incorrectly labels OG retros as OG retros in another video, because there's a little bit of controversy in the sneaker culture world about major brands labeling sneakers as OG retros when they're not actually technically OG, if we're using that definite, category of it has to be the exact same as it was when it first came out. And I'll talk about that in another video, but I'm just happy that today we talked about what a retro sneaker is and what an OG retro is, because now hopefully you guys will actually understand my second language when I'm talking about shoes on the channel. But if you're confused about anything to do with what a retro sneaker is and what an OG retro sneaker is, let me know in that comment section below, guys. I'll help you out with anything that you have to ask about. I'll hopefully answer any questions that you have and hopefully help you understand what it all means. I would like to say thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed our third episode of Sneaker Jargon. I actually haven't thought about episode 4. I can't really think of anything right now, but if you have anything to do with sneaker culture that you're not too sure on or you don't understand, let me know in that comment section below. I might make a whole video explaining your question. I might actually be able to help you out that way. But again, thank you for watching. Any questions, put them in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow all the socials in the description section below. Helps me out, helps you out staying up to date. And that's about it, guys. Episode 3. What is a retro? What is an OG retro? We've covered it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.